Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all of the support messages, all the things that you've sent my way, the show's way. I really also do appreciate all the suggestions that you guys have for show topics, because this is one that has come up consistently over the last few years. And so I'm really happy to be able to bring one of these to you. I know that I've had some episodes with guests talking about, practices in different forms and fashions. And so to be able to have this guest come on and talk about it is also great. So today, what we're going to do is talk about mastering a practice plan, which is really, really cool, because I've had so many guests who've come on and talk about how important it is to be organized, how important it is to have a plan with practice. And so many successful coaches that I've talked to have reiterated that fact a lot. And I think, like I said, it's really great that I've had quite a few of you as listeners kind of ask about, hey, do you have any ideas for practice planning, or what that could look like, or how do you know if your practice is good? So this is going to be great. So we're going to talk about what it's like to master a practice plan with my guest, kind of have him walk through some of the practices, kind of decide on what to focus on in a practice, and a lot of great stuff in between. So that's what we're going to get into with my guest today, who is the head boys basketball coach at J.W. Mitchell High School. Very happy to be joined by Coach Nick Borruso today. Coach, again, really appreciate you being able to come on and join us today. How are you doing?
I am doing good. I appreciate you having me on and talking hoops. I could talk hoops for hours.
Yeah,
So
isn't that the best? Yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
and to appreciate you and everything you do for coaches, and having a platform for people to listen and to learn. Like for me, I went through when we started talking with each other. I went through some of your podcasts that you had a couple of weeks ago, months ago, and I learned stuff from it just from hearing other coaches talk. So this is awesome.
Appreciate that, Coach. Appreciate the kind words. Let's start with you, Coach. Start with your journey through basketball, your journey through coaching. So talk us through where this great game of basketball has taken you, and this coaching journey has taken you, and how you ultimately ended up at J.W. Mitchell.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually started coaching when I was 16 years old in high school and playing basketball. My coach at the time was coaching his younger son in a rec league. So I had asked him if I could join and kind of be an assistant coach and kind of get a feel for it. And I kind of fell in love with it from there. And then I got into travel ball when I was 17, 18 years old, and then pretty much started coaching teams, at a young age, fourth, fifth grade, and coached this kind of the same core kids all the way through high school, which now that first kind of round of kids are just literally graduated, last year, this year, and the last kind of crop of kids are now seniors. So for me as a coach, it's cool to see them literally start their journey as players, and now seeing them, go to the next level or being a really good high school player. So, but that's kind of how I started. And then about 3 years ago, there was a job at J.W. Mitchell for the JV job, and I coached about, I would say, 4 or 5 of those kids in travel ball. So I kind of already knew some of the kids' parents. So the coach had an opening, and the way it worked out, I was hired, and I was a JV coach, had a successful 2 years, and also helped him out coach for, the varsity side. I was his head assistant coach. So I kind of got to learn, because my whole life I was always a head coach, right, for travel ball. And I've coached, 2 to 3 teams at a time during these seasons. So in my life coaching, I've coached like well over 1,000 games. I think now it's at like 1,200,000 games total, just coached throughout, 11 years of coaching. So like I said, I got into J.W. Mitchell as a JV coach, and then I was told, the head coach was probably going to retire after 2, 3, 4 years, and he actually didn't retire. He went to a different school to coach his son and his friends. So when the job came available, I went for it, and it was definitely a process to get hired. a lot of
Was
stuff,
it?
a lot of stuff I didn't know that would be asked or whatever. But there was a lot of coaches at the school from different sports that I became close with. That kind of helped me out through the interview process, and everyone kind of put in a good word. And I know the kids and their parents wanted me to be the coach there as well. So I had a lot going for me.
I'm curious, Coach, about what was in that interview process, or what did you kind of go through that kind of surprised you, or maybe you weren't expecting when it came to having to go through the process of getting the job.
You know, that's a great question. I was prepared. What I did is I kind of gave them a packet. It had like 5 sheets on it worth of just information about what I'm going to do about grades, what I'm going to do if a situation happens with a kid at school, fundraising, uniforms, building up attendance. Like, I came with them with a big packet of, hey, this is how, this is what I want this program to be. This is how I'm going to get there. And I gave them all the steps, talked about how the concession stand, like, I want in detail about who's going to be announcing our games, who the assistant coaches are, what their responsibilities are, ways to fundraise for the program, and kind of gave them an outline of, a dollar sign of what I feel like we can get to, to redo our locker room, get new uniforms, get apparel for the kids. So I came into the interview with a packet, which I think, was a good benefit for me to getting the job. But the toughest question they asked was, and this is going to sound like to most people an easy question, but for me it was hard, is what makes you a great coach? And I kind of like stopped. It kind of caught me off guard, because I try, when I was a younger coach, I mean, I still am a young coach, but when I was a really young coach, I kind of had that, arrogant kind of coaching feel, when I was coaching games, or, whatever. And now that I'm getting older, I'm getting more mature. So I do less talking about myself and more about the kids and their development. And, they say when you lose a game, it's a coach's fault. And when you win a game, it's the players that won you the game. I've
Yeah.
kind of taken the fall, and when the players win, the players win. So it was tough. That was probably the toughest question for me, is what made me a great coach. And I didn't answer it. I kind of gave like a brief answer, and then the next interview I had, I was more ready for that question.
Yeah.
But more,
That's funny.
admin. It's more, learning the rules of the school. They asked me, questions about grades and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say it was a typical interview. I'm trying to think off the top of my head now, kind of some of the questions. The biggest thing is making sure that you're going to be around, because I'm an off-campus coach. So the
Yeah.
last coach that they had was an on-campus coach. He was a teacher. So, and a lot of coaches in the Tampa Bay area, the head coaches are school teachers or PE teachers. So with me being an off-campus coach, they really wanted to make sure that I was going to be on top of things when, I'm not really there throughout the day.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's so funny that you bring that up about that, because it's like, yeah, you can handle like probably, so many different questions about, somebody said walk through a practice plan, or X's and O's, or parent interactions, but then the part of like you having to, like, you sell yourself, or you talk about yourself in a way that, like, almost like brag about yourself, and how good you are and competent you are as a coach. Sometimes that could be like the trickiest one, when that's not really what's on the forefront of your mind. That's funny.
No, and I'm type of person where actions speak for itself. So I want my coaching style and how I am as a coach to kind of speak for itself with all of the kids I've coached in the past, and kind of was there for their development, and to see where they are now. I kind of wanted that to speak for itself. But then yet again, these people who are interviewing me, the athletic director, the assistant principals, the principal, they don't know kind of who I am. They've only seen me for 2 years, but that's just a short little version of who I am as a person and who I am as a coach.
Yeah, awesome. Coach, I wanted you to also, before we get into this topic, kind of set the stage of what a basketball player's kind of high school experience might be like in the Tampa area, which is, I know where it is that you coach right now. I know every area kind of has its own like situation when it comes to schools trying to recruit at the high school level, and some it's very prevalent and some that it isn't prevalent. And I know that that creates a layer of challenges potentially at coaching. So I guess in a general sense for our listeners, can you kind of set the scene of what it might be like a player's experience in terms of choosing a high school to be in or being recruited in high school, and how does that kind of affect the coaches in the area as well?
Yeah. Oh, great question. Um, in Florida, especially for public schools, I mean, private school, you can go to any school you want in the area if your parents can afford it or there's scholarships. And you have to, if you want to drive 45 minutes, you can go to that private school that's 45 minutes away or 30 minutes or how far. But for public schools, it is school choice. So depending on where your school is and how many kids go to the school, obviously, if you don't have a lot of kids at your school or you have room, it's a lot easier for someone within the county to transfer to that school. The school I'm at is a very highly sought after school. It's an A school, so the school's full. So if a kid wanted to transfer to this work, to Mitchell, he would have to literally live in the zone for that to work. But if he lives outside the zone or in a different county, it's nearly impossible. Where, as other schools, if their school isn't really full, that would be easier for an out of county kid or a kid to school choice if they live in the county to go to that school. So as a coach, it just depends on what school you're at and how many kids are at the school. But as far as recruiting goes, um, in my experience, it happens. It's out there. A lot of coaches are kind of involved in the travel ball world, like, I was too.
Mhm.
Not doing that anymore, but, a lot of coaches are involved in the travel ball world. And, it's just kind of funny how the kids that were on their teams or in their organization are at the school where the coach at, right? And they live in a totally different area. But it's much easier for coaches who are at private schools to go after some kids. And again, you're not supposed to; it's against the rules. But when they don't necessarily follow the rules or no one's kind of policing it, it's kind of like the wild wild west.
So does that put you in a situation, or just coaches in general, in a situation where they almost feel like they're still have to recruit their own guys? Are you actively seeing situations or know about situations where, the guys are being, talked to or essentially recruited
Oh,
by other schools, and in a sense you have to almost year to year kind of try and make sure that you keep your team together so they don't have you don't have players, or other coaches don't have players going elsewhere?
yeah, for sure. I mean, for me personally, no, and I'll kind of explain why that's a no. But for other schools, I see, a kid comes into a school as a freshman, and then he's at a different school as a sophomore, and then he's at a different school as a junior, and then he's at a different school as a senior, and they
Huh.
kind of all go to the same kind of schools. Um, as they get older, they get to the better of the private schools that are in the area. But yeah, I wouldn't say that there's a roster for private schools that is, they don't have the same roster every single year. And I know kids graduate, but like for me, at this where I'm at, the kids that went to Mitchell as a freshman, they're here now as juniors and seniors. They didn't go elsewhere. And I also think too, it's the coaches kind of feeding these kids. I won't say who the coach is or what school, but there was a coach that told a few kids that if they go to his school, that he will guarantee them, a Division II, Division III college scholarship. So if you're a kid and you're a parent that don't really know any better, if you hear that, your kid can go play at the next level, I'm going to go follow and trust that coach. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen that easy.
Yeah, yeah,
So a lot of broken.
it's always tough, coach. I imagine when you have,
Yeah,
coaches making promises or trying to make assurances to guys, because how do you know, right? How can you actually promise something like that? And just the way that the landscape of everything is, I think it's just such a dangerous thing for not only coaches to try and make those promises, but also for players or for parents to kind of buy into those sort of things or trust, a coach to do that. It's like you want to think that a coach has like your player's best interest in heart and they know what they're talking about and they could do these things, but man, there's just so many unknowns and it's such a crazy, like volatile situation right now with the way college athletics are and the way colleges are looking at things that at the end, I think it just hurts the kid the most when those things don't end up getting the follow through.
it does. And it's sometimes I blame the coaches because sometimes the kids and parents don't really know any better. And, you can kind of tell them what they want to hear, and it happens. And kind of going back to what I said, for me, I'm not necessarily worried about kids leaving where I'm at. One, I built a pretty good relationship with them just being their JV coach. They're freshmen and some of them their sophomore years. So I kind of have a good rapport with those kids. So I was never really afraid. Now, if I didn't get the job, a lot of them probably would have transferred out. But since I got the job, they all stayed, and we're kind of junior heavy this year. So we kind of have two years to make some things happen.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I'm glad you're able to keep your guys. All right, coach. Talking about practice planning. Let's start with the planning part itself. So when you think about creating a practice plan, what goes into making the decisions about what needs to go into that practice plan? How do you kind of assess like your program's needs and kind of formulate a practice plan based on that?
Yeah, no, good question. Um, so it kind of depends where I'm at within the season.
Sure.
So to give you an example, let's use the start of the season where we're not playing any games. Um, I want to make sure, like, I'll split my practices. So say I have 2 weeks of full out practices before we have games. I'll go 1 week is, or I take that back. 4 days of the week is going to be just defense. And then the next week, 4 days are going to be just offense. And then those 2 other days, I'll use as like a walkthrough for what we just did. So
Mhm.
to kind of make it easier to understand, I'll go in, let's say we're doing defense the very first week. So my practice is going to be, if we have the gym for 2 hours, we're going to go all out an hour and about 20 minutes of defensive drills. But within those drills, it's not just like strictly boring defense for an hour and 20 minutes and the kids are bored out of their mind. I kind of throw in like defensive games within the drills that we do. So we'll do a drill for 10 minutes. And then for 5 minutes, we'll do like a defensive drill on what we just did, or defensive game on what we just
Okay.
did. So I kind of break it up where they're learning for 10 minutes because kids these days, their attention span is very short. You don't have a lot of time to really teach what you want to teach. So 10 minutes and then do a quick little game, whatever it is, for 5 minutes. So that way they're kind of practicing it live. And then again, a new drill, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long you want to make it, and then kind of putting it all together. And then at the end, we'll probably do half court or full court. There's a drill, it's called the 8 minute drill. And you're basically playing defense for 8 straight minutes. And there's, a lot of different stuff that it's a long drill to explain now, but one day we'll get back to that. So we'll do that to kind of close it up because it takes about 20 to 30 minutes. Both teams doing it. So my practices start if we're focused on defense, we're going to do defense. We're not really going to mix in offense. That's for the next week. So I have the little mini drills that we'll do. There's teaching points. We go over man-to-man defense, help principles, trapping off of man-to-man defenses. So the drills that I do are designed for so if we're working on help defense in a man, my starting drill might be a closeout drill from the help side. So you're starting down in the paint and then the ball gets swung out to the wing. You got to get there and close out. So that's like going to be our drill for 10 minutes. Then we're going to put it all together and maybe have a live guy shoot. And then the next drill, might be, a zone drill because I'm a kind of a 50-50 zone man guy throughout games. So we might throw in a zone drill and then kind of put it all together. But as of structuring my practices, I take the playbook right out of Bobby Knight's handbook, playbook. And basically, if anyone, you could look it up too on the internet, just Bobby Knight practice plan. That's how I format my practice plans. And everything's a time block. So if something's going to take 2 minutes, I'm literally going to put 2 minutes down on my sheet. If something's going to take 20 minutes, I'm going to put 20 minutes down on my sheet. And then I got to get through all of that stuff. And I give myself some time for water breaks, give myself like a 5-minute buffer in case the drill goes long. But, ever since I've kind of been doing these practice plans, I've been on time, on target, and I've found myself getting more into a practice or more done in a practice than if I didn't come with, a practice plan that's like very structured. You can come to a practice with a sheet of paper and have, 5 or 6 things that you want to go over. And sometimes you only get to 2, 3, or 4 of those. With the way I kind of have this set up, the way Bobby Knight used to do it is, everything that's on there is all time blocked. I have the name of the drill and I have like a little, my side notes of what I need to either watch for or what I need to preach that practice. I have guys right now that our closeouts aren't what I really want them to be at. They're not where I want them to be at. So, the last couple times we've been in the gym, we've really emphasized closing out, reading kind of, they have to. I'm a coach that teaches to kind of stay on your feet, close out, stay on your feet with a hand up. After they shoot, you box them out. If they drive, you're already kind of in a defensive position. We didn't jump and leave our feet and then get blown by. So a lot of kids, I should say, when they close out, they jump and then they're out of position. Where me, I kind of teach guys to be balanced, be under control, close out, hand up, contest the shot. If they don't take the shot, yeah, you're right there in a defensive position. And if they do shoot, well, one, they just took a contested shot. That's what we want. And then we immediately box out. We let them land, and then we box them out. So that guy's covered.
How do you kind of adjust to, you mentioned about the time blocks, you got things, down to a minute of how much time you want to give to something. How do you kind of adjust and monitor when maybe guys aren't executing it right or they're not understanding it right? You put something in place for like 20 minutes, but you could tell that even after that 20 minutes has gone up, like, okay, we're nowhere near where we need to be. Is it something that you just got to have to kind of let go and come back to it at a later time? Or how do you kind of adjust when maybe something isn't being executed or understood as quickly as maybe you hoped or thought that it might be?
Yeah, so good question. So I do that a couple different ways. I'll put 1 or 2 extra 3-minute water breaks on there. So I kind of build in like a little bit of a buffer in case I do need to take extra time. And also at the end of practice, I have us usually scrimmaging for the last. And when I mean scrimmage, not just roll a ball out, they're controlled. Basically, what we worked on that day, that's what we're emphasizing in that scrimmage. So I'll do it for about 25 minutes, the last 25 minutes of practice. And a lot of times, like truthfully, I only want us to really run full court for 15 minutes. So I give myself another 10 minutes, of scrimmage time that if I need to use it, I will. If not, we can work on what we need to work on. So I kind of set up, to answer your question, I set up my practice plan. I give myself buffers throughout. So if I do go over, it's not killing me.
And you mentioned about like you'll do a drill and then there'll be like some sort of game situation after. Is it, as you mentioned before, where like it's a certain type of game situation, but there's structure to it, or there's certain like expectations and how that game goes based on the drill that you were just working on?
Yes. And sometimes it's like a little mini game where we got to play to 4 or play to 5 and you only get 2 minutes or whatever. Or sometimes how I kind of design the drills, if we're not doing a game after, to kind of put it all together, I'm just adding to the drill. So like I'll start a drill off, a defensive drill, very basic, and then there's steps to it. Then I'll add a piece, and then I'll add a piece, and then I'll add a piece. And then when the drill's all over and I kind of have everything added that we need to add, that's when the like mini game will come out.
Okay, great. Um, so what then, after a practice is done, let's just use the situation that you said about a practice that's maybe more at the beginning of the season. After that practice is finished, how do you kind of reflect on, okay, this was a solid practice. We did a great job. We got what we needed done, or we need to spend more time on this, or maybe this practice wasn't as good. How do you kind of self-reflect and almost like grade yourself as a coach on how that practice went?
Yeah, and another good question. I mean, sometimes it's tough at the beginning because you're not necessarily playing against another team.
Hmm.
So like it's tough to kind of get a gauge on, is it really working or not? Because you're in practice, you're playing against each other. Players, teammates, they're playing against each other. So it's sometimes tough as a coach to see if things really work. And for me, it's questioning. So like I'll throw out questions throughout practice, especially if we're learning something new. And I will make sure that we're kind of on, or they're on top of their game as far as answering questions, something too to kind of keep them engaged. Like I don't want kids to just, if we're learning a new part of our zone defense, or we're learning, some trap locations where I want the ball trapped in our zone, and some of the kids, we haven't done this yet. I just don't like when they're, staring off at the roof, at the lights, looking at who just walked into the gym. So I always kind of bark out questions and kind of have them, show me. And then I don't know. It's a tough question what you ask, because
Yeah.
I'm confident kind of by just the way that I'm coaching and the way everything's structured that they're going to get it. I don't. That's tough. I mean, usually at the end of the practice in the controlled scrimmage, if we just worked on something for an hour and we built on it, we threw stuff onto the drill to build on it, and then we go see it live. And if it's not how I kind of pictured it, then yeah, that tells me we need more work. But if they go into that 15-minute game at the end of practice and what we just worked on, I'm seeing it, that tells me, okay, today we're good. Then the next time we do it, I don't really say anything. And I want to see if they, do it on them, do it themselves. If they do, I know I'm good. If they don't, I know I need to go back and refresh. I mean, it's kind of like going over out of bounds plays. Like
Mm.
you can show them once and then the next day they'll forget, or you can show them 100 times and the next day they'll forget. So it's just a gauge on, making sure that they truly know what they're doing. So whether you ask them a question about it, you make them physically show you or show their teams, or you make them write it on the board. So that way I know that they fully understand what we just did, and it's actually going from a teaching point to a, hey, this is actually it in a game.
And so then to follow up on what it is that you said, I imagine then it may be easier for you to kind of diagnose the success of a practice, maybe more towards like the middle or towards the end of the season.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Because
Okay.
you're playing against. I mean, it's a very tough question, because it just depends, right? But towards the middle of the season, like it's easier once games get underway. After a week or 2 weeks are in, I can now get a gauge on, okay, this is where we really need work, or this is what we're doing really well. How can we make it even better? Or we're not doing really good at this point. We're letting teams shoot 40% beyond the arc or 50% beyond the arc. What can we do to fix this? So yes, it does get easier as the season goes on. But at the beginning of the season, it's tough to gauge because you're not playing anyone off the bat. So the controlled scrimmages at the end of practice are usually how I can get a good sense. And asking my assistant coaches,
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
always an advocate of, if I'm going to have 3, 4, even 5 guys on my bench that are helping me, like they all have a job to do and a task, and I'll ask them, what their take on the situation is as well.
So, what then is your process for a mid-season practice? I'm always curious about coaches' planning perspectives when they're planning a practice in the middle of the season, about how much you focus on your team's development and the things that your team wants to be executing versus preparation for an upcoming opponent. How do you kind of balance those two? And in your experience, what do you kind of tend to focus those mid-season practices on?
Yeah, again, kind of depends on the week. Some weeks, if we have, let's say, 2 games in a week, we have 3 or 4 practice days in a week. um Obviously a lot of coaches look at their record to kind of give a sense of how they're doing. Or me, I'm more of a numbers guy, so I want us to be at a certain number for a field goal percentage, turnover rate, deflections. Like I'm kind of going off of the analytics to the game to see where we need to be and what we need to work on. And a typical practice, I'm always doing, like, if it's a, let's say the practice is on a Monday and we have a game on Wednesday. That's our first game of the week is
Mhm.
Wednesday. My Monday practice will be a skill development practice. We're going to work on offensive stuff. We're going to work on defensive stuff. And that's kind of how it's kind of all out. And then at the end, instead of like a scrimmage, we're going to shoot. So as the season gets rolling, our shots that we do in practice or drills that is all shooting, that goes up. So at the beginning of the year, it's more fundamentals, basics. Here's what we want to do. Here's what our defense is going to look like, or defenses. Here's what our offense is going to look like. And it's a lot of just doing drills to lead up to that. Middle of the season, I'm going more into skill work, offensive attack moves, defensive drills, one-on-one drills, a lot of 2-on-2, a lot of 3-on-3, and then shooting. That's kind of how I have it spread up on a day that's like, on a Monday. So on a Tuesday, the day before game day, that's where we're doing probably half the time we're shooting, and the other half we're going through a walkthrough
Mm.
of, you know, I'm going to give them a little highlight of what their starting 5 looks like, what their bench kind of does. I'll give them like what they want to try to do when they're, have, the ball underneath going for a blob play. I kind of give them their habits and kind of let them know, but I don't want my boys to focus so much on them and what they do. I want us to focus on what we do and doing it well. So I'll let them know briefly, hey, this is their shooter. This kid, he's a lefty. So, know that he's only going to want to go left. So, like, I'll give them brief little things about the players, and kind of what defense they run. A
Mm.
lot of coaches, they do just one defense the whole game, which is great for us, because I'm a fan of switching things up all the time. So if they're a man team, we'll kind of work on our man offenses and our fast breaks and what we want to do with the ball. Then on the defensive side, kind of seeing, okay, they have like, X amount of shooters or they got X amount of bigs, and then coming up with a good game plan for our defense to go against what they do.
Yeah, that's always a fascinating, and to me, I think it puts a lot of trust that you have in your guys of like, hey, if we execute things that we need to, we don't have to be so concerned about what the other team does. We can be aware of what they do, but like we can focus on our execution on things on the offensive and defensive end. If we take care of what we need to do, then it's like you have that trust in your guys that hey, we'll be successful no matter like kind of what the other team throws at you, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, the group of kids that I have, I mean, they're smart, they're intelligent kids. They come from good families. So, a lot of coaches I know aren't, they're at some schools, or they have kids that you have to spend weeks just to go over like one certain area of the game, where they kind of are already used to, like, if you were to ask me this question in 3 years, if we were to do one of these in 3 years, I would probably give you a totally different answer,
Yeah.
just because I would say 11 out of the, no, 10 out of the 12 kids right now I've coached probably for 2, 3, 4 years, whether it
Oh
was
yeah, a lot of
travel.
familiarity.
So they already know how I am as a coach. They know my philosophy. They know what I like. They know how they should be playing in games. So it's easier right now to kind of put together a practice plan. But if we're talking 3 years from now, I would then have to go in and see what we really need to work on. And, maybe a zone defense is not going to be our MO in 3 years. Maybe it's just going to be man. So every year our game plan changes based on what we have and how well the kids developed in the off season, whether it was, with our open gyms, our weight rooms, or them playing travel ball with their teams. So this year, like I said, we're junior heavy. 10 out of the 12 kids, excuse me, right now are juniors. So it's kind of like we're building something for this year and next year. So it's a little bit different than probably other coaches' situations.
Yeah, you're more on the I guess the refinement and the adjustments and the tweaks on certain things rather than having to completely teach from scratch, which puts you in, completely different environments when you're trying to get guys to gel together in chemistry and work together on things that are new to them versus like you all know each other, you've all played before, you've all been together, like let's work on, some adjustments here and there sort of thing.
Yep. The issue right now is getting them to play more as a team. They do good playing as a team, but as a coach, we always want more. Like, I want more, and really getting them to learn when we want to take a shot and when we don't, right? So some kids, they're feeling it and they're just going to chuck up a shot with a hand in their face, and they're all smothered just because they hit, 2 shots or 3 shots before they're feeling it. Whereas me, I'm trying to get them to learn, we want open shots, and this is how we get open shots. These are the different actions we do to get open shots. Here's the different plays we want to run to get open shots. I'm not a big fan of running 100 plays throughout the game. However, our plays are there for when we stall or when we get stuck. So if we're on a little bit of a cold spell, or we're on the losing end of a 6-0, 8-0 run, that's when play calls are there for the kids to kind of get out of that, to create an open shot or an open layup, to kind of get the mojo back.
Yeah, but no, that's interesting. And is that something that, you could try to zero in on a practice plan? Is that something that you can like identify as something that you can continually try to like work on and improve with your guys throughout the season?
Yeah. So when we do shooting drills or not, I would say a very small percent of the shooting drills we do are wide open. A lot of them have, if we're on the shooting machine, a lot of times that's when we'll get our open shots up, when we're just kind of catch and shoot, or we run around a chair or a screener, and put up shots, or a guy in the middle gets the ball and he's passing. And, that's when we shoot open. But in a practice setting where we're not using the machine, all the shooting drills we do are reading and reacting what the defense gives you. So if there's no hand up or there's no contest, that's what I classify as a green light shot. That's a shot that all 12 guys on the team can take. I'll never tell a kid he can't shoot. Even if he goes 0 for 100, keep shooting, because we're in high school. Kids need to still develop, right, if they want to go to college and play. But in practices, it's getting them to learn when to take a shot, when not to take a shot, and when the shot isn't there, what's next. So the drills will do kind of sets up for that. It's a lot of, like, for defense, I can kind of kill two birds with one stone. I can watch them close out, and then I also can watch the offensive guy kind of react to what he gives you. And I'll kind of tell the defense, secretly I'll do hand signals like, hey, close the shot with your hands down. Like on purpose, see what the offense guy does. Or, hey, go in and jump. So I kind of favor it so that the offense really, it's not just the same thing every time. They're getting a chance to really read and react, when they get the ball based on what the defender gives them.
And I think one of the things that's really important to a practice plan that you kind of bring up is just the concept of whatever it is that you want to be, running offensively or defensively, or whatever it is you want to execute, to really have precise, specific drills or things that you work on practice that really get them more experience with that, or get them better at that. I think I remember earlier in my coaching career, like, I had things I'd like to run on offense or defense, but the drills or the things that I'd like to work on, I don't think really specifically helped them necessarily execute that offense and defense, and to make sure that you're, like, really thinking about how are the things that you're doing really going to translate into what you want to see them do on offense or defense, I think is, like, really something that's important to keep in mind, and seems like something that you're very mindful of in your own practice planning.
Yeah, just, because again, as a coach, I was very fortunate to start coaching not at the high school level, but at the youth level, fourth and fifth grade. So it kind of taught me as a coach now that even coaching high schoolers, I have to kind of teach some of these things and do drills that you have to do with the little guys, because it's not just a drill to do a drill to pass time. It's a drill to work on something that we need help doing, or we have to be able to do in a game. So if we're working, say, a struggle of ours is offense, and which right now currently it is, true story. Is offense. So we got to be able to run a couple of plays, or run a couple of actions, or run a couple of formations, so that the kids can get better shots, or better looking shots, or more open shots. So there's a lot of actions that come with that: screens, elevator screens, dribble handoffs, getting a handoff, setting a screen, rolling. So the drills that I do are all drills that play has to offer as far as actions go. So they kind of already see the drill, and then when the play comes along, they're like, oh, this makes sense, and we're working on that stuff.
So now, as you kind of think about towards the end of the season, did your practice times change at all? Do the things that you're doing change at the end of the season? I know, at least in my experience, I've definitely had some teams where I really had to, shorten practice times, or really, I had teams that were kind of beat up at the end of the year, and I had to adjust things on. So how do you kind of assess where your team is at as the season kind of winds down, and make a plan based off that?
Yeah, end of the season is different, obviously, from the beginning or even the middle. You're kind of getting ready for playoffs. You have guys that are maybe hurt, banged up, like you said. Some guys are they're just whipped. They're tired. We've had a couple 3-game weeks or whatever it is. So the end of this season, the practice plan is a little bit more laid back before we get into playoffs. So when I mean laid back, it's a lot more film, kind of watching ourselves play. So I'll use sometimes practice time to just maybe watch film. Maybe they just need a break. We just got off of playing 2 games in a row. Some guys are banged up. So we'll just watch film together as a team and kind of go over, like watch ourselves. Like, hey, we ran this, it didn't work. Look at our defensive rotation. Hey, if we're in a zone, 3 out of the 5 guys have their hands up. So as far as a practice goes, it's mainly a lot of shooting, a lot of walkthrough stuff, and a lot of film.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm sure your guys appreciate that as well. And it's tough, especially if I imagine if your team's really looking to make a big, you know, postseason run or postseason push, and you want to try and get all this stuff done. You want to be perfect. You want to be at your best. But as you kind of talked about, like you really have to look at where your guys are at, and if you're trying to push them in a 2 hour practice when they're physically just beat up and not able to really execute and they need a break, like trying to push them, I think is going to be a lot more detrimental than just kind of taking a step back and just kind of like you said, going through film or going through something else and just kind of slowing things down.
Yeah, and getting them to learn, from our mistakes. It's how you get better, right? You have to
Yeah.
learn from the mistakes we made as a team, as individual, and I tell the kids, even myself, like if I watch a game, a film for one of the games we just had, I'm kind of watching it different times and I'm looking at different things. Like the first time I watch it, I'm just watching it to kind of enjoy the game, see what's happening. And then the next time I'm kind of pinpointing our offense. The next time I'm kind of pinpointing our defense. And then lastly, like I'm kind of reading and reacting what I'm doing as a coach, like my substitutions, my timeouts, my rotations, my play calling, my out of bounds plays. Like I'm kind of learning from some of the mistakes I make in games so that way I can be better as a coach because it's a team effort. Kids have to get better, the coaches have to get better, and we all have to do our jobs really in order to win and be successful. And
Yeah.
that included.
What are you hoping for, Coach, if somebody were to walk through your practices? What is your hope that an observer would see if they were to like walk through and just kind of be in there for a practice? What would you hope that they would be able to notice and see and get out of it after they left your practice as well?
Yeah, I really the biggest thing if someone were to walk in, they would think a couple things. One, those kids are having fun, and two, those kids are working hard.
Hmm.
Those are the two biggest takeaways I want from every practice. I don't want to be like again, it's easier for me to say this with the group of kids I have now. Like they already know how I want them to be in games and in practice. Like they know there's no goofing around in practice. When the whistle or start, when I blow the whistle or the horn goes off, like it's go time. The fun that we do have as a team kind of goes away. But at the same time in practice, I still want them to be somewhat loose and having fun with their teammates where it's not, like there's a time and place to have fun in a practice. But the MO is basically working hard. Like we have to work harder than we did the day before. We got to get 1% better, right? So if someone were to come in, I hope they would see that these kids are getting better for one, they're having fun, and they're working their butts off. That's what I hope someone could take away from a practice.
Yeah, I love the idea of the like having fun, and I think that that's such a big key to this that can sometimes get lost is that your guys, if there's a great energy or there's a lot of positivity in there, your guys are just so much more willing to learn and give it their all. And like they need to leave. At least I've always believed this, like your players need to leave like feeling positive, feeling good about themselves, feeling energized. They might be exhausted physically, but there's a certain level of positive energy that they leave with, and it's almost like radiant. You can almost kind of like feel it come off of them. And to me, that's always when I felt I had my best practices is when my girls are leaving, and you could just tell that like the energy is super high and super positive, even if they are, like I said, kind of physically exhausted.
Yeah, no, and I mean it's kind of one of those things where coaches always hear, man, he wants the kids to have fun. What kind of coach is that? Like, no, we're not out there playing knockout the whole practice, just jumping around or whatever. I mean, it's like for 45 to even an hour, it's an intense practice, especially at the beginning. So it isn't fun. It isn't, it's miserable, right? We as coaches are we're preaching things like we have to get done what we need to in a practice. So the fun kind of comes in when the shooting machine comes out and we're doing drills. We're on the shooting machine. I'll bring out the speaker and play, their playlist that they have. So that's the kind of the fun side to it. Of sometimes in practices we'll listen to music. It'll be a little bit more laid back, but I always hear coaches, talk about if you're allowing them to have fun, how can they get better? Like there's no one push. No, they work hard, but then there's a time and place where the fun kind of comes in with everything else. So, yes.
Yeah, it's such a long season that, man, though, if your team isn't having fun or they're not enjoying themselves, I think it's going to be really tough towards the end of the season after you've been them for a few months because and I'm sure you know this too, like when those practices aren't enjoyable and they don't leave with that positive energy, man, that they'll come into the gym and you can just already tell, they're kind of dragging or something's off, and it's almost like they it feels like a chore in some ways, and man, then all of a sudden that next practice is going to be really tough because they're walking in just not feeling great because they didn't leave the last practice feeling great, and it all just sort of, at least in my experience, it just kind of snowballs, and now none of your practices are really going that well because the players aren't that excited to be there.
No, and their focus, when kids walk in, like how you explain, like I kind of get a sense of just by the first 5 minutes of whether it's before 5 minutes of the practice starting or 5 minutes into the practice, like how much I have to teach with the group of kids. Like every day is different. That's what makes coaching so much fun because, you know, I like hearing advice from other coaches because it's not this, no one has the same team with the same players, right? So every team is different and every practice is different and your personalities on teams are different. So yeah, it's that's why, I love coaching, and I have a rule when I got into coaching, and it's still the same thing now. Like if the kids aren't having fun, then I'm not doing a good job as a coach. Like you can have fun and still learn and get better and be competitive and go on to play at the next level. I mean, but if a kid isn't having fun and they're dreading going to practice, or, they make up excuses about being hurt, like me as a coach, I'm not doing my job correctly if that's,
Mm,
and I've always said, like, as soon as a kid stops falling in love with the game and stops having fun with the game, that's when they stop playing the game. And as a
yeah.
coach, I don't want any kid to stop playing the game, so I have to make sure that yes, you're keeping everything fun, upbeat, a good learning environment, and kind of go from there.
One thing I also wanted to ask you, Coach, is where do the roles of your assistants play in your practice planning? How do you intentionally making sure that their assistants are involved, they have a voice? How is that something that you also intentionally plan for?
Yeah, so one assistant coach kind of focuses more on offense. So he's my as you will we'll use some football terms here.
Hmm.
One of them's kind of like an offensive coordinator, the other one's kind of defensive coordinator. So during games, they're not watching the whole game as a whole. They're kind of watching and helping me out with just offense or just defense. So during the practice, if we're doing defense, then it's kind of me and the defensive coach is kind of helping running practice, and he is doing some drills that he texted me or whatever he wants to run, so I put him in the I kind of put a time slot for him to do his drills. And then same thing on the flip side on offense, when we do offensive drills or plays or whatever, he's kind of involved. And then really the other coaches, I mean, if someone sees something, they usually blow their whistle, stop and correct, or let it go, and then pull the kid aside and correct. So everyone's kind of involved during the season and even during the games.
Hmm. Yeah, and giving them things that they're intentionally responsible for, like you said, I think one, it's really important, I'm sure, with empowering your assistants, and two, I think it's just really important your players know that, like, hey, every coach here is important. They all have a voice. We're all like in a sense like equal to one another, and it keeps your assistants engaged, and which is super important too. I know sometimes as coaches we like to take it all on ourselves and everything, but no, like your assistants need to be given tasks, they need to be given roles, and need to feel empowered that they're also a huge part of the coaching staff, which they are.
Yeah, and even at halftime, we could talk about, we talked about today, having a very structured kind of practice
Mhm.
plan. And to kind of go back real quick for people that are listening, like look up the Bobby Knight
Yeah.
practice plan and really, I mean, and you'll look at it and you'll be like, wow, this is really basic and easy. And all you got to do is go on Excel and put it in and you're good to go and print it. But so I, now I lost my train of thought. You might have to go
Yeah, you're
back.
talking about halftime, I think.
Oh, halftime.
Yeah,
Got it.
there you go.
Halftime. So I'll give my coaches a time, like I'll ask them all what they see. So, we give them a couple minutes to get in the locker room. We have to always let the refs in their little room. And then we kind of discuss for like 30 to 45 seconds of what us coaches you see, what we need to change, what the feeling is, and then we go in the locker room. I go in and do what I have to do, and then I ask all the coaches, to kind of add or something different. And then once it gets to about like 5 minutes, that's when we let the kids out. Like even our halftime, the way it is kind of structured because I'm a big believer that the kids got to get back out there and get warmed up and shoot. I don't want them sitting for too long.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100% agree with that. A couple other quick questions here before we hit our concluding segment, Coach. How has your practice planning been changed over the years? Are there things that you've kind of tweaked and adjusted where in terms of just the what you focused on in a practice plan or in general what you like to do in a practice plan? Are there things that maybe you've kind of changed because they didn't work for you? And kind of how has that like process kind of evolved?
Yeah. So the one thing that I started doing and what I talked about before is leaving some time to kind of people call it a scrimmage. I call it a controlled scrimmage. I added that in because I found it to be very helpful for again what I talked about before. I don't want to sound like a broken record. Going over something for a majority of the practice and then at the end in the controlled scrimmage putting it together. So, like I said, if we just worked on different rotations and trap zones on our zone, when we do that controlled scrimmage, both teams are doing it. That's
Mm.
what our focus of the scrimmage is. And I always think kids get better as they play and they learn things as they play. So it's kind of all put together of teaching, doing, real thing.
No, yeah, yeah, no, I like that. That's really cool. I think that the more transferable your practices are to like game like situations or what they're doing in the game, I think the players probably definitely see the meaning of it. I've done drills and I'm just reflecting on things I know in the past where I've done like these certain drills or these certain exercises with girls, and I could tell that they didn't really see what connection that actually had with like game like situations, and probably in some of them they didn't. And I think that they know players are smart enough to know what they're working on, and if what they're working on in a practice situation is going to really translate to what it is that they're doing in a game. And I think that we got to give our players credit that they know if something is just being done just to be done, or if this is like, oh, this is really meaningful, and I know that doing this really does have a tangible impact to what we'll be doing in a game.
Yeah, and to kind of answer a little bit more, like I said, I added in um the controlled scrimmage, but I also used to have a warm up drill that I changed to a different warm up drill, and we do that to start every practice, no matter if we're focused on defense or offense. And it's called the Bobby Knight drill. It's his 11-man drill. It's basically a continuous 3-on-2. We do that for about 10 to 15 minutes to start
Mm.
off practice. Go, you know, it goes over some defense, two guys versus three, right? It goes over offense, pushing the ball and making 1 to 2 passes for a shot that, we want to take. And it gets the boys kind of running and warmed up. And, we added things to the drill. It's not necessarily Bobby Knight's original drill. We kind of modified it into, our own drill.
Yeah, no,
But yeah, that to start every practice.
No, that's awesome. And I think that, it's really cool that there are things that you could do consistently and almost like kind of do for every practice, but yet because there's so much like variability with it and there's always like different ways that it's like executed or ran, like players are never going to like get tired of it, or like coaches aren't going to like lose, their interest in it. Like there's those certain things that are always good, and they're kind of like evergreen that you could always be doing. And I think those are super cool to have in your, practice planning repertoire, so to speak.
Yeah, and as I was younger, I was always, especially with the younger guys and me being a younger coach, it was always the typical, 3-man weave or 3-on-2, 2-on-1 to kind of start a practice. But as I got older and the kids that started coaching got older and it got, a lot more serious, I kind of went away with those drills and kind of added something that's similar, but a lot more advanced and more in depth and really working on things that we as a team work on all the time.
That's awesome. Coach, uh, one last question here before we hit our concluding segment, and that is, if you were to talk to like a young coach or a new coach who's maybe just joining and getting into this profession, and they're kind of overwhelmed, so to speak, with the the idea of like practice planning, or they've never really had to be running a practice on their own, and they're like, man, like where do I even start? Like I just this whole process of wanting to do this is kind of overwhelming to me. What advice would you kind of give to a coach about giving them kind of a starting place or a launching pad? I know you talked about the Bobby Knight thing, which I think is fantastic. There are other things as well that you think are like just that they need to do, or that you would recommend that a coach does to really kind of get themselves in the right track?
Yeah, for a young coach, I mean, I'm going to go about this two different ways. The one way, when it comes to practice playing as a young coach, my biggest advice and what helped me is really taking the time to sit down for 20 to 30 minutes. Like, even if I'm doing a practice plan for the practice of the day of or the day before, I mean, it takes me about 20 to 30 minutes to really put drills down on paper that I want to work on. So like I have a big sheet that I kind of go off of. Here are all my defensive drills and their names. Here are all my offensive drills and their names, and then kind of picking what I want to work on this practice. And each drill, like I said, is kind of designed for something different. So as like a young coach going over a practice plan, sit back and really think about what are the biggest things you as a coach need to get done within a time frame, and then kind of go from there. And again, if you're doing a practice plan and if you're doing it timed, like for me, I got frustrated when I first started doing these because I'd always go over time. So you asked me before about like what happens if you go over the time limit that you want. I've kind of learned over years to put in time buffers. So put in like 1 or 2 extra 3-minute, water breaks, or, do your scrimmage or whatever drill you do at the end, give it more time than usual. So if you do go over on something, which is fine, then that way you can kind of keep on track.
Awesome. Appreciate you sharing that, Coach. I think that's super helpful for young coaches. To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple of questions that I ask every guest. So I'll start here with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing it, our listeners would be able to learn from?
In what sense?
In the sense of, this is what I went through. This was kind of my experience that I had, and I think that you because of this moment, here's something that maybe you can do, maybe something that you don't want to do because of what I went through. Like I went through this, maybe you can, this is what I got out of it that might help you, or this is what I went through, and don't do this either because you don't want to make this mistake. I don't know. Guess take it either way.
Yeah, got it. So, like I said, I started in the travel ball world, and I think for coaches, I would highly recommend coaching at least a team or giving back and coaching a younger team, because as a coach, you can really learn a lot from it. But what I did, I made not really a mistake. I think I wasn't ready for it right now in my life where I'm at, is I started my own program. and I started with 6 teams. So like a lot of programs when they start, they only could get 1 or 2 teams. When I started one, I had 6 teams ready to go after tryouts, which was kind of unheard of in the area that, where I was doing it, kind of north of Tampa. I didn't really know that side. It's a business, right? I didn't really know that side because as a coach, I never really coached for money. I've always coached for my love and passion for the kids in the game. So when I started my own program, it got less of my love for the game and kids and more about money and paying bills and tournament directors and gyms and uniforms, and it took away from kind of my love of just coaching. So if I had to like go back on something, I think I wouldn't have started a travel ball program at the age of, I think I was 25 years old. And again, like I started coaching at 16, so it wasn't like I was new to this and just starting, but I learned quick. Like some people are just made to be a director of the basketball organization or whatever. Me, I'm just kind of like an old school type coach where I want to do things myself. And I learned with 6 teams, I needed help. And unfortunately, good help is hard to come by.
Yeah, it's trickier, right? Like when you find, but I guess on the other end of the coin, because I completely agree, man. When you do find good help, do whatever you can to not let that go because it is hard to come by, like you said. Like
Yeah,
go.
you got to find coaches, right? So I ended up coaching 3 teams when I started my program because I couldn't
Yeah,
find
wow.
coaches. And then the coaches I did have, you know, one coach was young, so I was good with kind of teaching him how to be a
Hmm.
coach. He had a 7th grade team. Like I told the parents and even some of the kids and him, like, there's going to be hiccups, right? There always is. I had hiccups starting out, so just be patient. And then I kind of got stuck where I needed other coaches, and you get into having a parent coach a team, and then it's kind of
Yeah. That,
so
that that's its own set of challenges there.
yeah. So my advice would be, if you are strictly just a high school coach or whatever, or you're a travel ball coach listening, like, yes, it's great to have your own program, but at the same time, like, if you're not ready for it, don't do it. Like me, if I were to do this again in 2 years, I would be much more prepared, much more ready for it than I was kind of just winging it. And when I wung it, I ended up having a lot more teams than expected, a lot more parents, a lot more kids, and a lot more responsibility. And it was a
Eh,
lot.
Yeah, you kind of think it's gonna go one way, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, like I have all of this, like I wasn't ready for this, and
Yep.
then it's yeah, completely overwhelming, I imagine. Yeah, for sure. Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest kind of what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's a catchy title, but you can go over 60 seconds. I just like to put a title to things, but I like to use it kind of as a platform for you to get out like a final message, a final thought, a closing idea, something that you just kind of want to leave the listeners with, whether it's basketball wise, coaching wise, kind of anything really. It's your soapbox after all. So, Coach, hope you have something served up here. I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor here and let you just sort of take it from here.
Yeah, sounds good. My biggest thing to the coaches that are listening is remember why you coach. Remember why you got into coaching and remember why you're coaching now. I think sometimes, as a competitive person myself, and I know a lot of other coaches are competitive, sometimes we lose track of our why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Because it's not a job that, people are making millions of dollars off of unless you're coaching D1. But the high school level, middle school level, remember why we're doing what we do. And that's, our love for the game, our passion for the game, and to help, whether it's the girls basketball or boys basketball, that, we're kind of their mentors. And we have to make sure that we're, helping all the kids that we can help and to develop them and to get them on to their next stages of their lives, whether it's after high school, it's college ball, whether it's, D3, D2, D1, or it's helping a kid with their grades throughout high school to get them off to a college or an academic scholarship. Like, there's more to coaching than just the wins and the losses. And my biggest thing is to kind of just truly know your why and why you got into coaching, and always remember it and to always do right by the kids.
Awesome. Well said. Always important for that level of self-reflection and to keep track of your why and not lose sight of the players that we serve. So that's awesome. Coach Borruso, man, really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on here and sharing some of your insights about a whole smattering of topics about practice planning and how your ideology of practice planning has changed, how you kind of change based on where you're at in the season. I really do appreciate it. You shared a lot of great stuff, and really excited to have had you on, and hopefully things just keep getting better and better in terms of your practice planning, the way your season goes. I know you got a lot of guys returning, probably have a lot of awesome stuff that you got coming up with such an experienced group of guys that you've known for a long time. So again, Coach, really appreciate it, and best of luck this coming season. Go get them.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you again for everything, that you do, and a great platform for coaches to learn and to listen. So kudos to you. Thanks to you. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully I get invited back soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.